Okay. Any questions on pretty much anything other than don't ask questions about my wife? I can't answer questions on that side because it makes me look over to that table. No, I'm just kidding. Oh, Max, you got a question?
Yeah, I have a few.
Great.
So I'll start with the one, maybe other people will have a question on it. Just a fun one, but yesterday you said you weren't a history buff. But aren't you with the Bible? It's a joke question.
Oh.
It's a joke question. You said yesterday you weren't a history buff, but aren't you with the Bible? You seem to know a lot.
Yeah, so with eschatology, actually, and prophecy, you have to know history. It ends up going, you have to learn history, right? And actually, the reason, sorry, sorry, I can't talk. So the reason why actually you have to know history, okay, is because when things are prophesied, to see if they're fulfilled, and if they're partially fulfilled, you have to understand history. You have to know history. Oh, thank you. In Romania, this is what you do. In America, that's very seemingly, but in Romania, you know. I'll save it for after.
When were you in Romania?
No, they're Romanian right here. Ruben, I was telling them about you.
Oh, yeah, I can. Yeah.
So they're teaching me Romanian customs and traditions. Like, they're just beating me up.
Okay.
Bucharest. So funny. Sorry, okay, sorry, all right, we'll be serious. This is how my whole class works. I make fun of all my students, right? And then after a while, they start making fun of me. I go, oh, you're starting to get comfortable. And then I make fun of them some more. That's my love language. That's why I'm making fun of these guys, Romanians. I have the mic, so I got last say. All right.
I have quite a bit of questions, but a lot of them focus on taking the information and being able to approach other people with this information. And so that's kind of my goal with these. So my question is, how would I start a discussion with those susceptible to the false signs and wonders? Where would one see the vulnerability, and how would one approach them to kind of say, hey, are you realizing this? Does it make sense?
So you're talking about false signs and wonders,
Yeah.
okay?
And for those believers that they seem to be susceptible to those false wonders, how would one approach them?
What do you mean by susceptible?
Vulnerable to false signs and wonders. We're all vulnerable to believing something that's not true. Convinced by something. And so
That's what I'm asking, because usually signs and wonders, when you say you're vulnerable, susceptible to it, it's to something else. It's not the sign and wonder itself, okay? Because there's going to be true signs and wonders with false motives, right? But it's pointing to something else. Like, believe this doctrine, believe this person. The false prophet goes, no, believe that the Antichrist, put your trust in him. So you're susceptible to the false sign, but to what is what I'm asking.
So is that how, as an example, someone sees something going on in Russia and Ukraine, and they say, hey, this is what's going on, and these are the signs and wonders, and we're saying, no, that's not actually the situation, but in a calm manner, how would one approach them? Say, hey, this isn't actually the signs and wonders that are being said in the Bible. This is just your own belief, I guess you could say.
I think you, in a dialogue, I think you want to bring it to the Bible and just bring that in and compare what you're seeing to the Bible and let the authority of the Bible bring clarity and conviction. Like in everything else, we bring it back to the Bible if it's a false sign and wonder that way.
Great answer. Follow-up question. This is just a challenging situation I've been put in. I have one particular
really saved to understand salvation. They don't understand salvation because the Spirit within them will convict them. And when they don't really, they say, I believe in God, but they don't have the Spirit within them, then they have no witness of God really bringing truth to them. Because once you know the truth of God, the Holy Spirit will draw you to the Word. And if you don't, not drawn to the Word, then I question whether they really believe in God. I'd rather mentor them to bring them to the place of Christ, of understanding what who Jesus is.
Yeah.
Because that you can't know, you can't say. Of course, you're going to say the Bible's not true if you don't have a relationship with God, because you have to have the Spirit within you.
So I understand that concept, but I'm actually just, the challenge is like, how do I guess you're saying mentor him to and say, hey, do you really know, is that how I would put it?
Yeah, I
Say,
would do a
how do you-
conversation with them. Yeah, lead them in, lead them. I have people come to my church to become wanted to become members, and I said, well, I really need to talk to you about. Do you understand what salvation is? And what is the meaning of salvation to you? Let them expose where they're at, and then you can fill in. Then, okay, let me show you from Scripture what it really says, and then bring them to the knowledge of truth. But the truth will set you free, and you want to bring them to that without trying to. You want to draw them in, not push them away.
Yeah, that's my
Yeah,
challenge.
so you want to put out nuggets of seed. Some people I have to give seeds to. Like I took people to Africa mission trips. People say, why do you take people who are not saved? I says, there will be when they come back. Okay. So my heart was during that time, I'm mentoring them and walking through that. It's a process of time. I'm not trying to get them to get saved today. That would be nice, but that's not my goal. My goal is how can I get them to see that they want what I have in my faith? Because they need to see the fruit. And when they start seeing the fruit, they come like, you know what? I don't think I'm saved. Can you show me how to get saved? You know, so you can lead them through that. And I think that's discipleship starts long before salvation, if I can put it that way. Because if you're at the workplace, you have a lot of unsaved people. How do you disciple them when they're not saved? You draw them into the place of sin. You have something. There's something different about you. I want what you have.
Can I punt on this? It's this pastoral issue more than anything. And so, which we can talk about maybe some other time. You know, like that line thing, it's just a pastoral issue, really. So. Next question. If you have more.
I do, but I don't
Okay.
know.
You know, with all this teaching that we receive, you really see that, I'm just thinking about the people who really believe that the church will be raptured before the Great Tribulation. Because also those people are really people who love Jesus, They love Jesus and they really believe what they believe is true, and it is sometimes I don't get into discussions with them because they also have scriptures that they use to prove that, Jesus is coming and before the Great Tribulations. So I'm just like, what, how to,
Do you have a question or
yes,
do you have a comment?
My question is, what is the best, what would be the best answer,
How do you talk to them?
Yeah, how do you talk to them, or the best, without, being offensive or?
I just tie them up. Start there, you tie them up, and then. All right, so Marissa asked, all right, okay, so really the issue, the elephant is this, when you talk about end times, it's the pre-tribulation rapture, okay? And that really wasn't my point in teaching this, but it's going to come up, okay? So pre-tribulation rapture is before the Great Tribulation, anytime that Jesus comes, catches us up, and then we wait with him for whether it's 3.5, 7 years, whatever time frame, while the Great Tribulation is happening on the earth. The Great Tribulation is to actually bring punishment for the Jewish people, right? In the midst of it, there'll be some saved among the Jewish people, the 144,000 witnesses, Revelation 7:14 are the Jewish people. And then when all that's done, then the saints come back with Jesus at the end. Right? It's a nutshell, a pre-tribulation rapture. With it is the doctrine of imminence, right? Meaning there's no signs that we have to wait for. He can come anytime. Right? So it's called imminence, meaning it doesn't matter. He can come like right now. It's like the Left Behind series. We're driving and going, okay, right? If this car's unmanned, then he's coming. That's the idea, right? So it's called the doctrine of imminence. I would just say, I don't believe in the pre-trib rapture. Right? I'll just give you my answer, and then I don't think the Bible teaches that. Okay, I know lots of people do believe it. I think the pre-trib rapture came with dispensational theology in the 1830s by Nelson Darby. Right, it's how the Brethren movement became in Wales, that area. Right, and it was started there. It caught fire, went through the Western Church. I would say half of the Western Church believes in the pre-trib rapture now. The rest of the world doesn't. The rest of the world, pre-trib rapture actually is under decline steadily, very fast. Okay, but in the Western Church, American Church, the pre-trib rapture is it's a pretty widely believed thing. I think you have to have a lens, be taught pre-trib and then read the Bible that way to see it. I think there's a number of things. I actually don't have a problem with people that believe in pre-trib. I was just having this conversation. I've had people come to our schools. I've talked to pastors that have their kids, and they are staunch pre-tribbers, and go, I actually, because I don't think it matters. For me, it doesn't matter, right? That's why I said, okay, you can believe pre-trib. I have one concern. My pastoral heart, okay, more than anything says this. What I worry about pre-trib is you can say you're pre-trib, you can believe it and live that way. My concern is that they're not prepared for hardship and suffering. Okay, so I say if you don't believe pre-trib, you can believe, because there's all these arguments, okay, about it. I go, that's fine, all right. And I don't really care, honestly. But my bigger concern in pre-trib, having right doctrine, okay, is going, no, we're actually going to go through hardships and difficulties and suffering, and we need to have a theology of that. Okay, going, no, we're going to get our lives prepared and get our children prepared. Because I think what ends up happening with pre-trib fundamentally is this idea of escapism, going, especially in the Western church, because it's very comfortable. America's comfortable, rich, we have everything, right? We don't. Right now, gas is a little high and we're complaining. We have a little bit of lack, or things aren't on the shelves, and we're going, what's happening? Okay, like the rest of the world's not like that, and so for us, we're so spoiled, and only in the West can you have a doctrine of what? Well, not just pre-trib, but it works with the prosperity gospel. Okay, like you're not gonna have a prosperity gospel in Iraq. It doesn't work. It's like you look at reality and you're like, this isn't the gospel. But only in America is it the breeding grounds going, we have everything we want. Okay? And the way God defines success is more money, bigger anointings, bigger buildings, bigger this. The prosperity gospel, that's really it, which isn't gospel at all. But that's the breeding ground that says that Jesus is going to save us from all the trouble. Okay? I think, and so my biggest concern is going, if you believe in pre-trib and staunch pre-trib, what ends up happening is, what happens if it doesn't happen? Okay, and instead of escaping the trouble, all of a sudden you're in the midst of it. Okay, and then what happens is going, wait a second, this isn't my Jesus. Like, he would never do this, because our theology says no, he won't do this, or we get offended, going, I'm supposed to be gone by now. Okay, and what ends up happening is, it's actually could produce the great apostasy falling away, right? Because you're offended. And so it's like that's my bigger concern than trying to get to do an argument about pre-trib. Okay? I've had many people come in and we talk about it. And I go, great. That's why I said, you can believe in pre-trib and we're still friends, right? Now if you're pre-trib, pre-trib, and we can still be friends. And so which is great. So I wouldn't. I mean, you can talk about it, but I don't have a lot of dialogue. And I go, the bigger thing to me is going, let's get ready right? To work together for the gospel, how to prepare for the things that are coming, okay? And I think, honestly, I think it's going to show itself that, you know. So that's my approach, and we'll have conversations, but I don't know if you can talk someone out of it in a lot of ways. It's like it actually causes more division. But my concern is suffering, all right? Persecution, suffering, hardship. That's my bigger concern. Going, we need to prepare our lives and our children for it. Okay, so but I'm more. I'll just tell you that I'm more post-trib, pre-wrath. I think when Jesus comes back, I think the Bible only teaches he comes back once. Right? It comes again once. When he comes back, we're caught up with him in the air. I think that's the last when that happens. Okay? And I think it'll happen. It's how you define pre-trib, post-wrath, post-trib, pre-wrath. It's all very similar, right? And I think it's how you define it. So.
I have a backup question on the suffering. We talked about suffering. It's not so much for my sake, but for the sake of the question being asked. We talked about the suffering and being prepared for it. How do we prepare for suffering? How do we? We're in a state. It's not something that we want. We don't want suffering, but we know it's going to happen. Not get caught off guard.
Yeah, so I think suffering is connected to fear. And the bigger issue is fear. Right? Fear is what motivates our lives. It's what the enemy uses. Hebrews says it's the fear of death. He entangled us with the fear of death. That's what he uses. Think about it. It's fear of sickness. Most people are run by fear. Fear of lack of money, right? Fear of whatever. That's what runs our lives. And we go, it's faith over fear, faith over fear. It's actually not faith over fear. Faith won't cause us to break fear. But 1 John chapter 4 says it's perfect love that casts out fear. Right? And so it's actually intimacy that causes us to have love, receive the love that breaks off fear. And when you don't have fear, right, you can enter anything. Like I heard the Lord spoke to me this phrase. He said, love will take you places where your reason won't.
That's right.
Because reason is connected to fear. It's all logical. But wait, go to over there, they're killing people there. It's dangerous there. I can't go there. I have children. I have blah, blah, blah. Right? That's logic. It's actually the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay? That logic. And it's controlled all of our lives. Most of society and life is controlled by fear. Okay? What breaks it is love. And that's why the anointing of the bridegroom love, right? Not just the love as a son, but the love as a bridegroom, it captures our heart. Think of when you guys were young or in love or, still in love, okay? It's like you do anything when you're in love. Okay? You'll follow the Lamb, you'll follow the Lord, because he goes, I'm here. You're like, if you're there, that's where I want to be. Right? And you go, what's the cost? You're like, okay, but love propels you so much greater and so much further than going, well, is it logical? Is it not? I'm afraid. Fear is what runs most of the world, including the Christian church. And most of the church says, I'm not afraid, and they're totally afraid. Right? Whenever someone tells me they're not afraid, I go, you say that because you're afraid. It's just Christian verbiage. It's code going, I'm not afraid, but you're really afraid. They're like, during COVID, we're not afraid. You're all afraid. Our actions speak it. So it's like, instead of saying I'm not afraid, it's like, be intimate with the Lord and let your actions speak it for it. Okay? So, I don't remember what your original question was, but. How do you prepare? Yeah. So I think one is you got to know the love of God. I think the church is very shallow in our love of God, very shallow. Okay, and we actually run our lives very carnal. And so one, we have to know the love of, and we got to know who Jesus is. We have to understand God's ways, right? Because offense will do it. I think offense is a huge issue. Because when Riley was talking, I was like, suffering, because suffering is promised in the Bible to us, many places. Okay, the problem is the idea that we have of suffering, individual suffering, is that we actually liken it with punishment. So we think it's the same. Well, if I suffer, I mean God's punishing me for something wrong. What did I do wrong? And it's actually not. It's actually the sufferings of Christ Because it's not, they're like, when they hate you, they're not hating you. He said, they're hating me.
Right.
Right? And there's a suffering for his sake that we enter into. It's a totally different paradigm.
Yeah.
Because when you think you're suffering and it's because of me, then you're like, God, why did you leave me? Why did you do this to me? You see how it's all about me? Right? It's not filling up the sufferings of Christ. It's going, what did I do wrong? Why are you punishing me? Right? That whole grid of me, and I go, the biblical suffering is actually not about me. I enter into it, but it's for him. It's his suffering. Who he needs.
To that point, I would say, Jesus walked with the crowds and he stopped and turned around and says, if you really want to follow me, you need to deny yourself. And that's probably something the West is we're willing to make a commitment, we're not willing to deny ourselves, not be fully surrendered, and be have a sacrificial life. Sacrificial life will change everything when you are sold out to Jesus. And that's what's required for all of us.
Amen. So, but I think we're going that way. I think the Lord, as things shift and as things, I think the Lord's going to give us understanding, right, of really what it means to really, biblical Christianity and have that mindset. And I think He's going to give us that endurance, suffering, persecution, perseverance, that theology. And honestly, what it is it's actually having the power of the Holy Spirit that produces a life to receive it. Josh.
It's like totally different.
Go ahead.
But what role, I don't know if we're going to talk about this later or not, but what role do you think the United Kingdom has anything to do with the end times? And I count it as the largest kingdom that ever existed on earth. And I don't know if we can go into that. But it had a lot to do with current day and age, just redrawing perhaps in the Middle East and how there's tension because of that very reason. I don't know. Even if it's just personal, maybe it's not as vital.
Yeah, so the British Empire, too bad Steve's not here. Okay?
The sun never set.
The sun never set in the British Empire. And they did have a hand in actually, like, yeah, right? What's that called? The Belfast Declaration, something like that, over Israel. I think Europe's only, what I can see, is I think Europe's mentioned either as an inference, okay, or it's the Mediterranean navals, or you can include America in there. And I think it's mentioned in Daniel 11, and I think it's mentioned as the ships of Chittim. Okay, it's usually this Mediterranean Western powers that actually come to help Egypt in Daniel 11. We'll look at a little bit tonight. But other than that, it really has nothing else it says about it, right, that I can see. So,
I was just thinking,
Yeah.
such a huge kingdom.
It was, yeah.
It's a kingdom.
I mean, unless you have a Roman Empire view, then I don't know how that works. For them, it could come out of that, but I don't prescribe to that. So,
So when we did the Israel intensive last year, we learned from the perspective of the Israel intensive, why the Middle East. So now with the Daniel intensive, we have a perspective or a lens of why the Middle East from this book Daniel.
yes. So, what's your question?
So from the lens of the book of Daniel, why the Middle East? Like why
Oh.
go to the Middle East?
Okay. Yeah, so from a Jewish perspective, right, it's actually everything's happening around Jerusalem, and what's going to happen is actually the gospel goes to the Gentiles to provoke Israel to jealousy. And I think geographically, at the end of the age, the gospel going to the Gentiles is actually the Middle Eastern nations, because in Luke 21, it says that, and it says when Jerusalem is surrounded by armies, right? When Jerusalem is surrounded by the Antichrist and by the armies, Jesus is very clear what he says, run, get out of here. Okay? It's the Zechariah 12 and Zechariah 14 that says when Jerusalem's surrounded, half of the city will be exiled. Okay, so there are going to be prison camps around in the foreign nations. And I think when they run and they're exiled into the Arab nations that surround them, so you have Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, those kind of things, they spread that way. And as they do, that it's the Arab nations or the Arab church, okay, that's gonna receive the Jewish refugees. And in doing that, they're going to be it's going to provoke them to jealousy. Because right now, we're not provoking the Jews to jealousy.
No.
Right? We don't provoke anyone to jealousy. Honestly, the church doesn't provoke anyone. Right? But, which is sad. Okay? So I think that's, from a Jewish perspective, I think that's what's going to happen. From the book of Daniel, it's actually the Middle Eastern powers, that's where the Antichrist comes out of. And I think it's a direct, spiritually, the Middle Eastern nations, the Middle Eastern church, the Arab church, the sons of Ishmael, I think they're the ones that's going to provoke them. But naturally, I think it's the enemy going, I'm going to use the same people groups. So you have both things happening at once. That's where the Antichrist comes out of, actually to annihilate the Jewish people. So naturally, the same people group are going to try to annihilate the Jewish people. Spiritually, that same people group, from the same people group, they're going to actually provoke the Jewish people. Does that make sense? And both of them stem from Abraham and Ishmael and their sons. And so, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, but that's where it shows, because the battles and all of the end time scenario happens around Jerusalem. Because the Bible, the way it's written, so we have a Western grid of the Bible, right? I'm thinking about us, we're Americans, so we go, look at the map, it's usually centered around America, okay? But it's like, but usually the Bible, it's centered around Jerusalem, Israel, Middle East. That's where everything happens. So when you look, there's tons of prophecies about Jerusalem, Israel, and Middle Eastern nations. And so that's where it started, and that's where it's going back.
I'm trying to word this the right way. So I noticed that there are several different empires, and then there's the Babylonian Empire. Are all of those other empires, in a sense, spiritually considered Babylon, like that are not following the Jewish roots, I guess, so to speak, with those? I don't know if that makes sense. Like, I didn't recognize that Babylonian, like those separate empires were their own empires. I always kind of thought like Babylonian was just like all of those empires together. Is that, or
So
they
essentially,
separate
anything
together?
that's not Jewish would be Babylonian,
Or Babylonian?
right?
Yeah.
So I think what you're asking is, okay, so historically, there are people groups and there's empires
Okay.
that are coming by. The idea that you're getting, I think what you're getting is, it actually comes out of the heart of Babylon, Revelation
Yeah.
17, because it says it's the spirit. There's oh, I just lost the phrase of it.
Babylonian spirit.
It's a. Where's Rael? I need Rael. But it's it's Mystery Babylon, right? That's why. So because it says it's Mystery Babylon in verse 5, all of a sudden when it says Mystery Babylon, then all of a sudden you can take it out of the geographic area of Babylon and apply it to anything. And that's what happens. So people have the idea like America's Babylon because of what we export or fill. I'm sure you've heard of that line of thinking, right? It could be, some people think there's a Islamic Babylon, essentially, like Mecca, okay? They project that. So once you take it out of just natural and its geography Babylon, which is in Iraq, then you can transport that idea to anything, right? And call it Mystery Babylon. And there's some truth to that, I think, because it's a spirit, okay? But I think more it's actually physical Babylon is one of the headquarters. And so I think, like if you follow the news at all, actually Babylon is being rebuilt. Okay? They put in millions of dollars to rebuild ancient Babylon. Saddam Hussein's the one that started it. Okay? And he started putting in, because of all the historic, geographic, cultural things there, so it's putting millions of dollars into it. And then when Saddam Hussein left, so this was my history guy. Okay, Saddam Hussein left, what happened is this: when it left a void, okay, and what ended up happening is people started going into Iraq for the oil, okay? All these transnational companies started going into Iraq for oil because there's this void, and then it got increasingly unstable, right? So people left. But as it's gotten more secure, there's a lot of money and oil in Iraq. And so as that goes up, Iraq's actually themselves, they're trying to rebuild Babylon. Because to them, we look at Babylon, well, that's negative. But for them, it's their homeland. It's their identity, right? It's their cultural center, ancient cultural center. Even in Iraq, in Erbil, where we went, there was the oldest, what is that, Omri? The Citadel. It's the oldest city in the earth. It's right there. And so we walked it, things like that. So for them, those are all cultural icons. And they want to preserve, and they want to rebuild. So
So I noticed on several of the maps that you showed us yesterday was around the Fertile Crescent, the Tigris and Euphrates area seem to be in all those maps. Is there a reason for that?
that's where it is. That's the geography of it.
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
just nothing spectacular, it's just there.
It's the beginning of civilization, and really it's the borders of Israel, what Israel's promised. Israel's actually promised as a nation that is from the Euphrates all the way down to the Nile. It's a massive land area. And Israel in their history has occupied, I think, less than 10% of it in history. And so that means in the Millennial Kingdom, they're actually going to occupy the area that God gave them, Genesis 15, Genesis 17, right? That area they're going to occupy again. So, but it's really where everything happens. It's the origins and the fulfillments. It's all that area.
Just one more second question. The mystery of Babylon, is that, I guess, connected to the Antichrist system or Antichrist spirit, not the actual physical man, which I'm sure they're connected, but like there's an Antichrist culture and spirit. Would that be connected to what the mystery of Babylon, or is there any connection, or am I?
Yep, there's a connection. Yeah, because it says the Antichrist actually carries Babylon, right? So Harlot of Babylon is a huge topic. There's a lot of ways to interpret it, and there's just a lot of different interpretations. But yes, there's definitely connected. And John says in 1 John that the spirit of Antichrist is alive now,
Right.
right? There's also the man, but the spirit is here as well. Okay, it's always been that. It's been that way. So, yeah. Okay. Any questions? Okay.
Still have questions that no one else does.
I can't look that way.
So you gotta look
It's
that
not,
way.
it's not you, it's your neighbors. I mean, they're my friends.
Israel was in distress, but we're in a position of seeking the promise. So they were secure even though they were struggling. As a body of church, we seem to fall short of this faith. What secured Israel in their time that the church is failing to do now? Or why was Israel, does that question make sense? Like, okay, so they were going through a time of suffering as they were, what was it, 40 years?
70 years.
70 years, yeah. And, but they seeked the promise of promised land. They had their eyes on it. And so they were secure in their faith in God, even though they were going through those struggles. As a church now, we have the scripture, we've got the entire Bible before us, and yet we fall short of a similar position. Is there
So you're trying to compare the wilderness wanderings of the 40 years with the promise ahead of them, right? And how they entered into the promise. And you're saying, why is the church entering into a promise even though
No,
it's
I'm
scriptures?
not saying why. I'm saying why aren't we in a position of faith? Because they were in a position of faith. They kept following, they kept going, and the church just seems to kind of meander around. I'm not saying everyone, of course. There's many ourselves, I believe, but there's just churches who.
So, okay. So I think part of it, there's always a remnant. This is my perspective. When you look at Israel, it's actually all of them didn't enter the promised land. They were full of unbelief. All right? So those 20 and older actually were all killed in the wilderness, right, over 40 years. Okay? And so they didn't all enter. And there was actually only a remnant that entered in. Okay? And I think the same is now with the church. There's a remnant right now. And it's really by faith that we walk and believe the promises of God.
this thing of like it's our comfort that causes us to not rely on the Lord, which is true, but also we look there, yeah, all the comfort taken, they still deny the Lord, and that's the wickedness of the human heart, and so that's why really it takes what the whole thing, what the whole scriptures points to is that actually it's not comfort, it's not suffering, it's actually the Lord's grace that allows us to even come to the first place. Then we have to say yes, and so. Is that?
There's a lot of reasons. God's faithful, He led them, His covenanted promise, they're going to enter in, and Moses didn't enter in, and they had signs and wonders, right? Like having signs and wonders, alright, so, where's my phone? So, when you have signs and wonders, we think it's a good thing. Signs and wonders isn't always a bad thing at all, okay? But when you look at it, do you know why God gave signs and wonders? What? It wasn't just, no, not hardness of heart. It's Deuteronomy 13. Deuteronomy 13 says the false signs and wonders, or signs and wonders as for prophets in the Old Testament, right? Because when they did signs and wonders and they were wrong, or prophecies and they were wrong, they were stoned. Okay, so you didn't get a second chance. Okay? But it says He gave it to actually test the people. Deuteronomy 13 says signs and wonders actually were given to test the people. Okay? And so now when you have signs and wonders, because the Antichrist is going to do false signs and wonders empowered by the devil. But there's also these signs and wonders among the church as well, by the Holy Spirit. And you can fall into the trap of just believing and running after signs and wonders. And thinking signs and wonders validate. And they don't. Actually, the signs and wonders follow the disciples. That's the biblical pattern. And so it's given, I think it's given to actually test the mental hearts of people. It's actually signs and wonders. And so in that generation, they lived by it because they actually didn't have a lot of faith. Okay? I think. Because a lot of them, the older ones all didn't believe. And then even, and this is a whole different topic, but Moses didn't enter into the promised land either. It's a different reason. But. Okay, so we should get away from that topic.
All right, I don't know. Can you explain a little bit more about what the Israel's distress or Jacob's trouble drinking means?
Yeah, we'll look at it later tonight, actually. It's a time of great tribulation.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very clearly laid out in Daniel 12.
Okay.
All right, anything else? And then we'll move into Daniel 8.
One more, I guess.
Yeah.
I can keep asking, but one more.
You should sign for a private session.
I saved all my questions.
For Keith.
I saved all my questions.
Oh, it's called BMS. Oh, it's called the Forerunner School. No, go ahead, Max.
Wisdom to those who are wise, but how would one start wisdom? This is what I have written down. So in Daniel 2:21, He gives wisdom to wise men and knowledge to men of understanding. How does one even begin being wise?
What does the scripture say? What's the beginning of wisdom? I didn't answer it. He did. And she did. So, yeah, it's actually fearing God first. And then what you do is you give yourself to the Lord and to the scriptures and to the Word of God. Okay?
How would you define fear of the Lord? Fear of the Lord. Departing from evil.
Departing from evil. Yeah.
What do you say?
How do you define fear of the Lord? Departing from evil.
Job 28.
So,
Departing from evil. What was that? Job 28.
I know your brain's very analytical, you know. I would say it's like, you go, God, I'm just very simple. God is God, and you submit to Him. You get yourself, you fill yourself with the Word. You know, and it'll be amazing. It'll begin to transform you because the Word's living and active. Right? And so the easiest thing is this: what does it say? And then how do I respond to it? You live by that, and you'll be changed. It's really simple. You know? It is. It's not a secret. It's just it'll change our appetites. It'll change our capacity. It'll change the way we think. It'll change our perspective. It'll change everything about us. Is actually the Word of God.
give us a word for them, because when did you stop seeking? When did you stop talking to him? And I feel like, I know the church at large is in a really hard place, just because of the signs and wonders they want to see all the time. It's not the precious time of sitting with him. You're just spending time knowing who he is, who Holy Spirit is. I love what we've been talking about, like the person of the Holy Spirit and things like that. So, because I feel like, because even some of the kids today are asking me, well, how will we know if we're in the end times? These are kids that are not even worshiping God. How will I know that we're living in the last days? And these are kids that are asking simple questions like that. And for me, being in that, but just being in the right place, at the right time, in certain places, it's us being ready to give account, of our lives, how we're living. We're like, well, what do? I just continue to seek the Lord. I may not have the right answer, but don't stop seeking, and living that life. But the church, for the last 12 years, for Atlanta, when we traveled to all these churches, is the Lord put us on a mission. Because I do understand what somebody had said about how will you know? Why has she lost her, from what I heard in a different way, maybe flavor or whatever? It's because she stopped seeking the Father. She stopped seeking a relationship. She just wanted to go for companionship. Close to the
All right, thanks, Barb. All right, let's start Daniel 8. We'll start focusing here on Daniel 8. And maybe we'll do some questions after too, because Daniel 8 and 9, I'll tell you, it's full. And it's not the easiest, so Daniel 8 and 9. So we'll start in Daniel 8. All right. So let me just say, we could have brought this up earlier, page 93. We're on page 93. So in Daniel 8, there's debate over when Daniel was written. Okay, first of all, and some liberal scholarship says Daniel was written after Daniel's life. He actually didn't write it, but it was written later in the 100s, 200s BC, something like that. And because the reason why is because they said Daniel could not have known the prophecies about what was going to happen with the different empires and the different kings and all of that. It was just too exact, too precise. So instead, it was afterwards, all right, in the time of actually Antiochus Epiphanes, okay, that they're in trouble, and to strengthen the Jewish people so that they can have hope, a pseudo author wrote the book of Daniel to show how God's prophetic and how God knows. So he wrote it after, okay? It's called the Maccabean Thesis, right? And so, which is crazy for us to think that, but I'm just telling you, in seminaries, this is the prevalent view. Yeah, he could still talk about them, even though it was written later. This is when it was written. So it's not prophetic in nature. Okay. So that's a guitar. Okay. So I'm just letting you. It uses as court legends, all right, and pseudo prophecies, meaning it happened afterwards. Letter A, that's a Maccabean Thesis. Letter B, the historical fulfillment. The other one says this: is that the book of Daniel is all historically fulfilled in Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay, so Antiochus Epiphanes was a northern king that came out of Greece. We'll look at here. Okay, and he reigned from 175 to 163 BC, right, during the Maccabean revolt area. And what he did was it's where Hanukkah came from. Okay, where they didn't have oil, right, and so they put a little bit of oil, and it lasted I think like 12 days or something, like 8 days. Okay, and the tradition is that he slaughtered a pig, on the altar, and so that was the abomination of desolation. And so, which I think he did, something like that. And so it's like, and so they look at that and say that's the fulfillment of the book of Daniel. And so it's also called preterism. Okay, preterism, which means prophecies are fulfilled historically. Okay, and there's no more for the last days. And so that's a view, that's a historical fulfillment view. Okay. Then there's an end time fulfillment view, letter C, third view holds that the first 8 verses of Daniel 8 we'll look at here are historically fulfilled in Persia and the Grecan empires, while verses 9 through 12 are entirely fulfilled future. The little horn is none other than the future Antichrist and will be fulfilled completely in the end time, just prior to the second coming of the Lord. Right? So that's an end time fulfillment. And then letter D says there's a dual fulfillment. Okay? Meaning like the first 8 verses, the fourth view is held by most futurists and parts ways with the third view with regard to the strictly futurist views of verses 9 through 12. Okay? Verses 9 through 12 are seen to have a dual fulfillment. The little horn is seen as having both historical and future significance. Okay? So it could be fulfilled in Antiochus, but it's just a foreshadowing of actually the Antichrist at the end of the age. Okay? So there's just different views on how to see it. I think the easy one, as Jim mentioned, about the preterist view, okay, because preterism is increasing as well in history, because preterism is connected to all-millennialism. So these are all just big terms, but all-millennialism, sorry, Meredith, because the reason why is all-millennialism is coming out of our seminaries right now, okay? So in our seminaries are actually more liberal without a biblical worldview, okay? And that's our new pastors, but that's, and what's happening is all-millennialism is coming out. All-millennialism is also tied in with replacement theology. So you get rid of Israel, you get the Old Testament, okay, as well in all-millennialism, and everything's allegorical. It's not as literal. All-millennial is very allegorical. Right? There's no millennial kingdom, and with it, you have a lot of preterism as well, which means it's all fulfilled historically. So there's nothing literal about the end times. Okay? There's nothing literal that's coming up. And that's one of the biggest theologies that are coming out right now. Why did I say that? To warn us. Because here, the easiest thing here is this. Jesus in Matthew 24 goes, remember about the abomination of desolation from Daniel? Right? Look out for that. Well, if it was fulfilled historically, you're like, wait, that was almost 200 years ago. And Jesus saying, no, not that one, not that. He goes, it's still yet coming in the future. So right away he goes, well, that's not the answer. Right? It hasn't happened yet. Right? And that's really that. And then in the book of Daniel, here's another easy one, is this. Chapter 11, we'll look at tonight. But in Daniel 11, okay, chapters 10 through 12 is one vision. Chapter 11, verse 21 through chapter 12, right, verse 2 and 3, it's all actually one thought process. It goes from the history of the Antichrist, or a history of Antiochus, transitions over to the Antichrist, but we know that because it correlates in chapter 12, verse 1, with Michael, the archangel, arising, with the Great Tribulation happening, and it ends with the salvation of Israel and the resurrection of the righteous dead. Okay? Meaning, the Antichrist is connected to, in sequence, in the chronology, it's connected to the Great Tribulation, and it ends with the resurrection of the dead. And so if it happened in history, we're like, where's the salvation of Israel? Number 2, where's the resurrection of the dead? Right? It hasn't happened yet. Okay? It's a really easy answer in those ways going, because it's all connected together. Other places it's not, but in Daniel it is at the very end. That's why it's a capstone. Okay? Daniel chapter 12. Okay, let's look at Daniel 8. I love Daniel 8 here, okay? So let's just read it and then we're in a hurry. So in the 3rd year of the reign of Belshazzar, the king, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, subsequent to the one which appeared to me previously. I looked in the vision, and while I was looking in the citadel of Susa, which is in the province of Elam, and I looked in the vision, and I myself was beside the Ulai Canal. So he's in Iran, somewhere in there. Verse 3, then I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, and here's what he sees. He says, I see a ram which had 2 horns, was standing in front of the canal. Now the 2 horns were long, but one was longer than the other, with the longer one coming up last. I saw the ram butting westward, northward, and southward, and no other beast could stand before him, nor was there any to rescue from his power, but he did as he pleased, and he magnified himself. So he looks and he goes, I see this ram. It's 2 horns, one's longer than the other, okay? And it's Persia and Media, the 2 different nations there. And and here he goes, and he saw it budding westward, northward, and southward. And he said, and he goes, and no one could stand, meaning this ram was a prominent empire in their day. Okay. Now, if you look in verse 20, if you have your Bibles, look in verse 20, as the interpretation, Gabriel comes to give interpretation. Gabriel tells him, the ram, verse 20, the ram which you saw with the two horns represents the kings of Media and Persia. So we don't have to interpret it. It's given to us. That's how we know it's Media, Persia, okay? And so here what he says is the ram, he sees Media and Persia, and they're the dominant empire, and they're budding out here in verse 4. Okay? Then in verse 5 it goes, while I was observing, so he's looking at the ram, behold, a male goat was coming from the west. So he goes, now there's a male goat coming from the west over the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground, and the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. He came up to the ram that had the two horns, which I had seen standing in front of the canal, and rushed at him in his mighty wrath. So I saw him come beside the ram, and he was enraged at him, and he struck the ram and shattered his two horns, and the ram had no strength to withstand him. So he hurled him to the ground and trampled on him, and there was none to rescue the ram from his power. Okay. And so you have the ram first, which is Media Persia, then the goat, okay, in the west. Now look at verse 21. Gabriel interprets the goat. The shaggy goat represents the kingdom of Greece, and the large horn that is between his eyes is the first king. So I mean, just clear interpretation. So you have Persia, Medo-Persia as the ram. They're the mighty power. Then you have the goat from the west, which is Greece, which actually in the Hebrew, it says Greece here, but it's translated Greece. It's actually Yavon. It's the Yavon region. You guys can research that. But Yavon, if you look at a map, it's actually more Turkey-Greece region. It's actually more into Turkey. So it would be modern-day Turkey, all right? But it's that region there. And so here, then you see the goat coming from the west. He comes headlong at the ram, right? We should do a demonstration with these young guys over here. And, right? Do it, you know. And so he comes and he just pounds the ram, okay? The goat comes and hurls into the ram, and the ram couldn't stand. Okay? So it shows us you have Medo-Persia, you have Greece coming. So think of history. In history, this is actually the second and third empires. Right? So you had Babylon, Medo-Persia, and then Greece. And so now Daniel is being honed in on these second and third empires. Okay? So you have Medo-Persia, and then Greece comes. The shaggy goat comes from the west at lightning speed. It says fast, and it comes and hurls itself and defeats the ram. Verse 8. Then the male goat magnified himself exceedingly, but as soon as he was mighty, the large horn was broken, and in its place there came up 4 conspicuous horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. And so it says right when he was mighty, talking about the horn, and remember it says the large horn in verse 21 is the king, is the first king. It's talking about Alexander the Great in history. Alexander the Great came, conquered the entire region, but he died. He was broken at his height at 32. Okay? He was broken. And then from there, it spread, that the fight for his empire spread to 4 generals, okay? 4 families. And over the next few hundred years, they were fighting back and forth. But out of those 4 families, I said 2 emerged. 2 families emerged. And they're written, this is called the Battle of the Diadochi. Okay? Over these years, hundreds of years, different battles, and 2 families, the king of the south, which is the Ptolemies, and the king of the north, which is the Seleucids. So these 2 families, the Seleucids and the Ptolemies, emerged. Okay? Out of these 2, they were the 2 dominant ones. Okay? So there, if you look at page 97, it's just a description about Alexander the Great. It's really historical, but there's a description about him and some things there historically. Okay. Where did I? Okay. So from there now, as he was broken, okay. So we're going into verse 9. Now the reason I say this, maybe we should talk about this. where, I think it's in the notes somewhere. Sorry. I should just follow my notes. Okay. If you look at page 95, okay. Look at page 95. Its the vision is for the end times. And so here in Daniel 8, okay, verse 17, if you look at verse 17, it says, so he came near to where I was standing. Gabriel comes, okay, which is significant in itself. And when he came, I was frightened and fell on my face. But he said to me, Son of man, understand that the vision pertains to the time of the end. Okay? He goes, the vision pertains, meaning what's happened here, what you're seeing, is actually for the end times. Okay? Let's look at verse 19. Look at verse 19. He said, behold, I am going to let you know what will occur at the final period of the indignation. Or it's another way to interpret the final period of wrath. Indignation, wrath. It's really talking about the Great Tribulation time. He's saying, I'm letting you know this is when this vision is for. It's actually for the period of indignation, for it pertains to the appointed time of the end. Right? So he's explaining to us going, no, it's not about history. It's actually for the end. Okay? Let's look at verse 26. Verse 26. It says, the visions of the evenings and mornings which was told is true, but keep the vision secret, for it pertains to many days in the future. And so I think 3 times he's telling us, going, no, what's happening here, it's historical, but actually it's for the end times. Okay? It's actually for the end. Because it depends on how you read verse 1 through 8. Okay? You have the ram, and then you have the goat. Now I think, all right, this is just my interpretation of the first 8 verses. I think we're going to see this again. Meaning, I think what we're going to see is, if it's a futurist view, that we're going to see Iran emerge in the Middle East as the dominant power, as the ram again. Okay? I think they're going to emerge as a dominant power. And after they do, I think what we'll see is Turkey, Greece, Turkey, but Turkey, Erdogan, I think they're going to be the dominant player, attack Iran, and become the dominant player again. Okay? That was the Ottoman Empire. Right? It was the Ottoman Empire. And I think what we're seeing right now is, if you look in the Middle East, actually, Iran is emerging as the dominant power in the Middle East. Okay? They do it, one is because they're trying to get the nuclear bomb, but even more than that, they have been, through their military, all right, the Iranian Guard. Iran, depends on how you look at it, they actually control up to 4 nations in the Middle East right now. All right? They actually control up to 4 nations. Even in Iraq, when you're in Iraq, Iran helps run Iraq. Right? When we were in Baghdad, it's actually, you have Iranian posters. Posters of the Iranian general. Okay? They help in, what's it called? I just lost it. What's that other nation? So in Saudi Arabia, right, and UAE right now, okay, it's actually, there's these groups that are attacking them, the Houthi groups that are fighting against them. Iran's the one that's actually funding them, and Iran's the one that's giving them all the weapons to fight against Saudi Arabia. Right? So here's why. Now, let me go on bunny trail real quick. So, sorry, Pastor Danny, I gotta just do it. I hope you don't think less of me. No, so think of this. Geopolitically right now, we need oil. We don't want to buy it from Russia. Who has oil? Saudi Arabia, okay? So President Biden goes, hey, Saudi Arabia, why don't you sell oil to us? Help us out. Saudi Arabia goes, I'm not even answering your calls. They're like, why? Because Saudi Arabia goes, President Biden, why are you being friendly with Iran, loosening sanctions and letting them get the bomb, while Iran is empowering the Houthis and them, and they're throwing bombs at us? You're allowing Iran to fight against us, and you want us to be your friend? I'm not calling you. That makes no sense. That's exactly what's happening right now. Right? So Iran in Syria, Iran in Lebanon, right? So you have Hezbollah in Syria, right? Hamas in Israel. You have Lebanon as well. Okay? Iran is the dominant player right now in the Middle East. Now, will they go forward? I don't know. More than that. But it's interesting to see. And then the other part is Iran or Islam connected to communism. It'll be very interesting. There's prophecies about communism and Islam coming together, right? Since Saddam Hussein was out. But anyway, I think that Iran is the dominant nation to look at in the Middle East. Okay? And then what you'll see though is you'll actually see Turkey arising. And we'll see what Turkey does. But if Daniel 8 happens again, Turkey's the one that will actually be empowered, and they're the ones that will come and fight against Iran. Now what's interesting about Turkey is this: for years after the Ottoman Empire, we were actually very friendly with Turkey. Okay? Turkey's the gateway into the Middle East, and they were democratic. Okay? They weren't actually Islamic at all, and they were democratic, and so America was friends with them. They were our allies. But in the last, I think, 10, 20 years, they've shifted to be very Islamic, and now they're shifting in this way. So we'll see what happens there. But the reason why this is important, right, and I think the next prophetic move is going, okay, is it Iran? That's really what we're looking at going, is it Iran? Okay, is because if it's Iran and then Turkey comes as the goat, verse 9, this is the key. Because out of one of them, meaning out of one of the four tribes or kings that came out of Turkey, okay, out of Alexander the Great, okay, it was broken into four different groups or four generals, and that's what it's referencing here in verse 9. Out of one of them came forth a rather small horn. They're like, okay, here's a little horn again from Daniel 7. And here he's telling us where he's coming from. He says it's actually coming forth from one of the four from the goat. All right? So you go, wait a second, that's clearly Middle Eastern. It's not Roman. Here, it's clearly Middle Eastern because it's coming out from the goat. He says, out of one of them came forth a rather small goat horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land. Okay? Meaning it's going towards Israel. Verse 10, it grew up to the host of heaven and caused some of the hosts and some of the stars to fall to the earth, and it trampled them down. It even magnified itself to be equal with the commander of the hosts. Verse 11, and it removed the regular sacrifice from him, and the place of his sanctuary was thrown down. Verse 12, and on account of transgression, the host will be given over to the horn along with the regular sacrifice, and it will fling truth to the ground and perform its will and prosper. So there's a lot there. This is Daniel here, verse 9 through 12, okay, is the hardest passage to interpret. I'll just tell you that right now. This is the hardest passage to interpret right here. Okay? I'll just give you a couple highlights from it because I've looked at it for a long time. It's just hard to exactly maneuver what it's saying. But what's clear is this, is the small horn or the little horn comes out of there. That's really clear. What's clear is he goes towards Israel, the beautiful land. What's also clear is this, is that here you have the abomination of desolation in verse 11. That he removes the regular sacrifice. And this is the key event of the end times, is the abomination of desolation. Okay? It's mentioned here in chapter 8, it's mentioned in chapter 9, it's mentioned in chapter 11, right? It's mentioned in chapter 12, it's mentioned 4 times in the book of Daniel, it's mentioned 8 times in the Bible, the abomination of desolation. Because the abomination of desolation is a singular event that has to happen, right? That you can't mistake it. You can't mistake the abomination of desolation. Because we know it has to be one event in a singular place in Jerusalem, in a rebuilt temple, with sacrifices happening, and there's one man that comes in there that stops the sacrifices. The way the Old Testament describes it is that the sacrifices stop. The way the New Testament describes it, when Paul describes it, he says, this man, the Antichrist, will come in and he will declare himself to be God in there. Meaning it's only one event, in one place, one person. You cannot miss it. Right? And he says when that happens, it's the clearest event that reveals the Antichrist. He says when that happens, it says you have 3.5 years left. Right? You're entered into the Great Tribulation. It's that event right there. That's how clear it is. Okay? And that's why Jesus in Matthew 24, verse 15 says, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was described by Daniel the prophet, okay, says it's very clear. He's referring right here, Daniel 8. Okay, he's saying, That's how you'll know. You're those preliminary signs. But when you see that singular event, it's the most important event that defines the end times. And I believe it's what defines who the Antichrist is. Because we'll look at in Daniel 9, because the tribulation 7 years, but at what starts the beginning of the tribulation is the covenant of peace, right? Is a covenant, but it's hard to find out what is this covenant exactly, right? People have looked and going, is it, the Oslo Accords? Is it, is it made here? Even every president's trying to bring peace into the Middle East right now, okay? And going, is it the Abraham Accords? What is it? And it's very hard to nail down. Going, there's the covenant of peace. Right? The reason why is because when it says it's a firm covenant in Daniel 9 verse 24. We'll look at next session actually. The way it's translated, it doesn't mean he's going to make a covenant. It means he's going to strengthen a covenant that's already made. In the Hebrew, that's how it's literally translated. That it's a covenant already made that hasn't been enforced, but the Antichrist will enforce it. And so you're like, well, which one is it? It's hard to determine always. Right? It's like when President Trump made Jerusalem the capital of Israel, he didn't do anything new. It was already, the decision was already made. He just enforced it. Okay? He didn't bring new legislation. He didn't have to. None of the presidents actually enforced it. And so he goes, we're just going to do what we said we were going to do. Okay? That's kind of like what the Antichrist will do. There's already a covenant made. So there's been numerous covenants. Go, which one is it? So it's hard to tell exactly. But what's really clear is the abomination of desolation. And that's the central point. And it's mentioned 8 different times in the scriptures. Okay? So if you look at page 98, right? And 99, there's just a few of these different things. So it grows to the host of heaven. Okay? And what does that mean, right? It's not exactly sure. We know that, and I'll talk about this tonight, there's an interplay between the Antichrist, Michael the archangel, Satan being thrown out of heaven in Revelation 12, and the Great Tribulation. And I think it has to do with that there. But it's not exactly clear. I think God will give us understanding. I think these verses here, there's so much in these verses, it's hard to understand. Because it's not really clear. I've looked at many translations. You have different people saying different things. So I'll leave it to you at that, because I'm just not really clear on it. Right? What's clear is clear, but it's this guy, Reggie Kelly says this. He goes, the defeat of the devil is in the details of Daniel. It's really good. Okay? The defeat of the devil is in the details of Daniel. And it's really true. Because the prophets gives us a ton of details. Okay? Some of it's in here, in chapter 8. Okay? But it's not super clear yet. And so I don't want to say a lot without it being clear. There's some different ideas. I put in the notes for you so you can read it and you can look at it. Okay? What it means to grow up, things like that. But we know this, that he's going to stop the sacrifices going on. So what it conveys here in chapter 8 is that there's a Jewish-controlled Jerusalem with a functional temple that's rebuilt. Okay? That has to happen. Okay? And so really, it's going to come about, and we'll look for it. When you see that, let's continue. So let's read verse 13. It says, "Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the particular one who was speaking, 'How long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply while the transgression causes horror, so as to allow both the holy place and the host to be trampled?' Verse 14, "Then he said to me, 'For 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the holy place will be properly restored.'" So this vision a lot of times is called the vision of the 2,300 evenings and mornings, okay? Or the vision of the evenings and mornings. That's how it's described in verse 26. And so what he tells us is this. He's going, okay, how long will the abomination of desolation, essentially, how long is it going to defile that temple? Okay. And the answer that the angel gives, that Gabriel gives, he goes, it's for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the holy place will be properly restored. Okay, are you guys following me? Okay. Okay. We should, you know what? Let me go back to page 103 real quick, okay? And then let's tackle this 2300, and then we'll take a break. Let's go back to, because I want to talk about the abomination of desolation a little bit. Okay. Page 103, just some highlights about it, because it's so central. Sorry, I should have went there first. See, the abomination, number one, leads to desecration. On the wings of abomination, or creating this abomination, it leads to the desecration of the temple. It's the revealing of the Antichrist, his power to desecrate, and the final decree of judgment on the Antichrist. Meaning, we'll see it in chapter 9, but I think what happens is at the abomination of desecration, the Antichrist actually writes his defeat at that place when he does this. The one who desecrates the temple actually receives the judgment that's been said on it. And so it's like he puts his future, he puts a nail into the coffin, it's his own future. Okay? I think that's what happens there. Number two, the abomination of desolation is done by the Antichrist. It's clear. 3, the abomination of desolation is an image that's set up. It occurs contiguous with the stopping of the temple sacrifice. So the way Paul describes it, okay, and the way John describes it, is that it's an image that's set up. Paul in the 2 Thessalonians says, right, he's going to declare himself to be God. John in the book of Revelation says there's an image that's set up in the temple. And so in the Old Testament, it's the sacrifices stopping. So all of those are going to happen together. Okay. Number 4, it'll occur in the period of the week, the final 7 years, in the middle of the week. So it will be 3.5 years into the tribulation period. We'll look at that in Daniel 9. There will be a setting up of the abomination of desolation in the temple. This is referring to the image that John saw in Revelation 13. Okay. Let's actually, it's page 102, the page before. Let's read it here. Okay. Well, let's read the 2 before, because I was thinking, let's just read the 2 Thessalonians 2. Verse 3 says, "Let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the apostasy comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction." And here's how we know who the man of lawlessness is. It's the one who, verse 4, opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. Okay? It's very clear. Right? And really, people think this idea that Paul wrote in 2 Thessalonians 2 is alluding to Daniel 8 right here. It's alluding to Daniel 8, because that's what he's saying there. Revelation 13, it says, "He exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and he makes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth because of the signs which it was given him to perform in the presence of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image of the beast who had the wound of the sword and has come to life." It's the image of the Antichrist. "And it was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast would even speak and cause as many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed." So this image of the beast will be set up, and the image itself will talk. Right? And so we don't know if it's holograms or what, we have no idea, okay? But that's what it says, that it itself is going to speak. And if you don't listen to it or don't worship it, you'll be killed. Now, the whole issue of the abomination of desolation, all right? The abomination of desolation happens at the midpoint of the tribulation, and right afterwards, the mark of the beast, the 666 mark, is instituted. Okay? And the 666 mark is where you can't buy or sell, but really the issue of the mark of the beast isn't about buying and selling. Yes, that's included. It's actually about worship to the Antichrist and to the devil. Okay? It's really clear. It's in Revelation 13 and Revelation 14. Right? So think about what the Antichrist is after. He uses harlot Babylon, because remember he's empowering harlot Babylon. It's causing, it's a worship system, a religious system. It's causing people to come away from their original faith, right, with immorality, harlotry, perversions. Okay? And then halfway through, when he and the 10 horns burns harlot Babylon, now he's in charge. It happens at the abomination of desolation. The Antichrist is in charge, and now what he's after is, he's after demonic worship. He goes, I want you, it's not enough that you left Christianity or Hinduism or Islam. He goes, I want you to come worship me, and if you don't worship me, I'll kill you. Okay? That's what he's after. Because remember, what was the devil after? Worship. The devil wanted worship. Okay? It's Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28, it talks about the devil, and he is after worshiping. He wanted to ascend above the heavens, above the throne. So it says about Jesus at the temptation in the wilderness, the devil says, he goes, in Matthew 4, he goes, come and worship me, because I'll give you the nations, I'll give you the world, I don't care, he owns it, I'll give it to you as long as you worship me. Right? And so he's after the worship of the nations. That's what he's after. And so here he goes, I'm going to enforce it by the mark of the beast. Now, I don't believe you can take the mark on accident, okay? Because those who take the mark, this is really serious, Revelation 14, those who take the mark will burn forever in the lake of fire. Okay? If you take the mark to Revelation 14, there's no going back. That's what it sounds like. There's no going back. And so you can't go, okay, I'm going to stamp the mark on you on accident. Okay? It's like, no, it's a conscious choice because the mark is synonymous with worshiping the devil. Okay? And so some people go, is the coronavirus, is that the mark of the beast or this or that? I go, no. Okay? You'll have a cognitive choice going, worship the devil, worship the Antichrist, or else. And he'll threaten us with our lives. He'll threaten us with you can't buy and sell. Right? But the whole point of it from the devil's perspective is he wants worship. He wants worship. Okay. Number 5, so there's a setting up of the abomination of desolation. Number 6, the image of the abomination speaks and directs people to worship the Antichrist. We just read that. Number 7, Jesus referred to the abomination of desolation as a clear sign, a hinge for the transitioning of the Antichrist to appear. That was Matthew 24. Number 8, Jesus referenced back to what Daniel taught about the abomination of desolation. So let's read the summary, letter E. The Antichrist will demand worldwide worship. This will be the abomination that leads to desolation. God's judgments will bring desolation or destruction to all who participate in this terrible abomination. The worship system is based on the Antichrist, called the beast, setting up an image, a statue, an idol, of himself in the Jerusalem temple. This image will be demonically empowered to breathe and to speak. The Antichrist will claim to be God when he sets up this idol in the Jerusalem temple. No one will be able to buy or sell without worshiping the Antichrist before this image. All who refuse will be sought out as criminals of the state under threat of martyrdom. I mean, he's going to threaten to kill them. This is one of the most significant prophetic signs in the end times. John emphasizes this image 10 times. Okay? And the abomination is mentioned or described 9 times. So I mean, it's very important. Okay? The image of the beast and the mark of the beast will be 2 components of the abomination of desolation system that will mobilize and finance the Antichrist global worship movement. Because it's all about worship is what he's after. The image of the beast will mobilize Antichrist worshipers and penalize those who resist. The mark of the beast will provide economic support for the Antichrist worship movement and will penalize those who resist. So that's when you look at it, it's not just about buying and selling. It really is about worship. That's what he's after. He's after a worship system. Now, what is he doing? Take a step back. Jesus has a worldwide worship system. Right? It's the prayer movement, the worship movement, the missions movement. Right? And so Jesus goes, he actually started it. Okay? And he's doing it, and the Antichrist is going, he's copying that, counterfeiting it, going, but I'm going to do it by force. Right? Because actually, it's a whole other topic, but worship, prayer, right, is actually how power is given. It's actually a way of it's setting up altars that the power of God actually comes on those altars, and whatever altar is fueled more presence, whether it's holy or demonic presence, actually comes. Right? It's actually altars, and that's a basic gist of it. And so you have God a generation ahead going, no, I'm going to start a worldwide worship movement, right? And we're part of that. Right? Praise God. And the Antichrist goes, I'm going to counterfeit that at the very end. So, okay. All right, let's look at this 2300 evenings and mornings, okay? Yeah, the 2300 evenings and mornings. This is pretty fascinating here. Okay. So, let's go, okay. So the key of this in verse 14 is it says, he said to me, 2300 evenings and mornings, then the holy place will be properly restored. The key is when the abomination of desolation is actually removed and the temple is properly restored. So we actually go backwards. We count backwards in this one. Okay? It says, when is the abomination of desolation removed and when is the temple properly restored again? It's actually found in Daniel 12. If you turn to Daniel 12, okay? Just follow with me. So in Daniel 12, okay, verse 11, Daniel 12:11, it says, from the time that the regular sacrifice is abolished and the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. Okay? It says from the time that the abomination of desolation is set up, which is at the midpoint of the tribulation, okay, there'll be 1,290 days. And right away, you guys, all you biblical scholars are going, wait a second, 1,290 days? Doesn't it mention 1,260 days for the Great Tribulation? Okay? It's 42 months times time and time and a half, or 1,260 days is the Great Tribulation. And here Daniel says, yes, it's set up, but it's set up for 1,290 days. Meaning, the Great Tribulation ends, and it seems like for 30 days, it's still set up. Interesting, isn't it? Okay? The other part that's interesting is this. He says in Matthew 24, it says, unless those days have been shortened, no life would have been left alive. Meaning, I think it's shortened to 1,260 days. Okay? And so what happens is when Jesus returns, or the Great Tribulation ends, the temple, I think the abomination is actually still set up, and it's not removed or totally cleansed until 1,290 days. Okay? It's not totally, because remember, when Jesus returns, there's still human process. It's not like he comes and blink, everything's done, everything's rebuilt. Because think of what happens at the end of the age. There's judgments that happen, the seals, the bowls, the trumpet and bowl judgments. The earth is devastated and destroyed. Jerusalem is ransacked. Jesus is marching up through, in Isaiah 63 through Edom, and the reason Jesus comes back, a number of them, one is to save Israel, but he actually comes back in a military campaign. Okay? He's not the Jesus of Christmas, a little baby that's coming. He actually comes, in Revelation 19, he actually comes with a sword in his mouth and to cause war. Let's read that real quick, because I think this will help us. Because this idea of Jesus is actually a little bit different, but in Revelation 19, verse 11, he says, I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it is called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he judges, and he wages war. Okay. It says, his eyes are a flame of fire, on his head are many diadems. All right, verse 13, he is clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies which are in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, were following him on white horses. And from his mouth comes a sharp sword, so that with it he may strike down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. And he treads the winepress of the fierce wrath of God the Almighty. And on his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Okay? So he actually comes, and when he returns, he actually makes war. Okay? Most people don't get that. You think, oh, he's coming, yay, we're going to save him. We are raptured. We meet him in the air. He gives us the Bema Seat judgment. We get our glorified bodies. We come back to the earth, and we actually are involved in this war with him. Okay, this fighting, I can show all that. But all right, and so they think, oh, he's just coming to the Mount of Olives to rescue Israel. Well, there's a process that happens. Now, you can say, well, because he's quoting Psalm 2 here, and you go, well, we can allegorize that. Look at verse 17. Look at the next verse. Because then I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried out with a loud voice, saying to all the birds which fly in mid-heaven, come assemble for the great supper of God, so that you may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of commanders, and the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and those who sit on them, and the flesh of men, both free men and slaves, and small and great. Okay? And so he's talking about literal war, people dying. Because the declaration is to the birds of the heavens, come and eat. because there's all these people that are slaughtered that Jesus is going to kill. Right? So that picture of Jesus, we're not always comfortable with. Because we go, wait a second, I don't know if my Jesus does that. Right? And these are the things I'm saying we have to be familiar with and get used to, because he's not just the Jesus that comes at Christmas and the little lamb. Right? He's also the roaring lion. Right? His heart's full of zeal with justice, right, and righteousness. Okay? And so when he comes back, there's a human process dynamic of time, of marching, of restoration. I think the 1,000-year reign, part of it's at the beginning, he's rebuilding the earth. The earth has been decimated by judgments. Right? Look at the bowl judgments. A third of the earth is covered by this, and all the grass is burned up. I mean, all these things are happening to the earth. And he's, so when all the grass is burned up, we don't have to mow anymore. Look at Daniel, so happy, because he has a long, in his card, I said, because it's the first trumpet. It says all the grass is burned up. So on the card, I put mowing until the first trumpet. Jennifer made me not give it out. I go, man, what a conversation starter. They're like, who has a line like that, you know? I go, well, I guess you can't use the Bible for those things. I don't know. So I was like, we're going to mow until the first trumpet. Praise God. At least there's an end in sight. Okay? Oh, my goodness. So, what? I made them. I don't know where they are. So, okay. So the idea is this, is that the abomination of desolation happens, the temple's desecrated, and actually the image is set up, and it takes some time for this. And in Daniel 12, it actually says, and blessed are you if you make it to the 1335 days at the end there. Okay, so there's another time frame. So it's 1260 days, the end of the tribulation, 1290 days, and then 1335 days. Okay? And there's ways to different interpret that. I would say the 1335, almost nobody, the Bible says nothing about it. So whatever you make up, whatever you say, it's really conjecture, honestly. There's almost nothing about the 1335 days. The 1290 days, it seems like it's when it's restored, that the image is set up until then. Okay? So it could be the 1335 days is a resurrection, the first resurrection, right? It could be that, and it could be a number of things. It's when Jesus' government from Jerusalem is set up and ready to go. But if you take Daniel 8 and Daniel 12 and it goes, the 1290 days is when the image is, or the temple is restored. It's cleansed and restored at 1290 days. Then what we do is, there's a graph here. If you look on page, what is this? 109. Oh, there you go. 108. So don't let this graph scare you. Okay? So what you see here, you see the 1260 days called the Great Tribulation, right in the middle. Okay. From there, you have the additional 30 days of Daniel 12, so it's 1290 days. Okay. And at the end of the 1290 days is when the temple's restored. And so in Daniel 8, it tells us it's 2300 evenings and mornings, then the holy place will be properly restored. Okay? So if that's the case, you go from the end of the 1290 days, and you go back 2300 days. Okay? You go back 2300 days. And when you do that, you actually end up about 9 months into the tribulation. Okay? You end up, what you see here, it's 85 months here altogether. It's 84 months is the tribulation, 85 months with the additional 30 days, roughly. And when you go back 2,300 days, you end up around 9 months into the tribulation. You guys follow that? Yes? So you start, right? You start here. Here's the tribulation. You start 1,260 days, additional 30 days here. And so at the end here is when it's restored. And so from here, you go back 2,300 days. That's right here. Go back 2,300 days, and it brings us to right here about 9 months in to the tribulation time. Right? And so, like, what's the point of that? Well, there's a couple ideas, some ideas. People go, something's going to happen at this 9-month mark. Remember, the Antichrist here, to start the tribulation, it's the covenant of peace. So you have to make a firm covenant with Israel and the many so that the sacrifices can start at some point. Yep, so right here. So that's the Great Tribulation, which is 3.5 years. This is the first half of the tribulation. Right? So the tribulation itself is 7 years long. The Great Tribulation is the final 3 years, 3.5 years. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. And this is in Daniel, next chapter in Daniel. It's his 70th week. Right? Yep. So that's what we don't know. Okay. So yep. So good question. So we don't know. So this, because it doesn't say much. So, but we know this. By this point here, right, at the abomination of desolation, by that point there has to be a functional temple and the sacrifices. Okay. So it could be. Here's some scenarios. Here, the reason the Jews accept the peace agreement is because it allows them to build a temple. Okay? Right now, they can't build a temple. They don't even own that area, actually. They don't even run it. The Hashemite family, the Jordanians, actually run the Temple Mount. Okay, so they actually can't even, every time the prime minister goes there, there's rioting and all kinds of stuff. It's just ideas. So at some point, though, before this, the Jews have to have a temple that's functional. Okay, so could it be that this is going to allow them? Could it be they build one here in 9 months because everything's ready to go? And could it be here, some people think at 9 months is when the sacrifices begin. That's one theory. Others think at 9 months, the Antichrist does something here, the sacrifices have already begun, and he does something there that reveals kind of who he is. Right? There's that idea. No one exactly knows. We just know he gave us this date of 2,300 days, going, God, why did you give it to us? It's got to be important. But he didn't tell us exactly. He just said, he goes, it's 2,300 days. And you're like, okay. So it just gives us information, but information is important because Gabriel's the one that gave it. Gabriel's only mentioned 4 times in the Bible. Okay? It's here and then the birth of Christ. So, I mean, pretty important. So when Gabriel shows up, you're like, okay, this is important, but what does it mean? Okay? And that's what we're trying to sort out. Because in Daniel 12, he goes, I'm going to seal the book and conceal it until the end time. Meaning as we grow closer, I think there's going to be more and more revelation that comes out. Right? Not extra biblical revelation, but it's like a mystery. It's all here. Right? Remember, the defeat of the devil is in the details, right, of Daniel. So it's there, but we don't exactly know. But this is clear. It's 2,300 days. And so that's the idea here. Will it be a defiling? Will it be something that's going to be actually the start of the sacrifices? And they're like, when you see this day here that happened, you know the rest of the timeline. Yes. In this, so here, the division, it's the midpoint of the tribulation. That's when the sacrifices will stop. Yeah, he ends it, yeah. Yeah, that's when the sacrifices stop. Yeah. Okay. And so those are just ideas, but all of a sudden, what happens is a couple things just out of Daniel 8. One is, you see the little horn arising, you see his primary activity. And it really has to do with Jerusalem and with Israel, stopping the sacrifices. But I would say you see him arising out of the goat. Okay? Meaning it's clearly, even if it's historical and it's an allusion to what's going to happen at the end, right? It's clearly the goat is coming out of Turkey area. It's Middle Eastern. Okay? The other thing, okay, we'll look at Daniel 11. I'm not saying that. Well, it's this, the Antichrist doesn't start his own country. He doesn't start his own empire. He actually, out of Daniel 7, what we see is this. He's a little horn. So it means there's already an empire there. There's turmoil going on or a transition of power, and he comes in. He doesn't start his own empire. Right? He actually takes the place that's not, Daniel 11 says it this way, it's not conferred to him. And he's not the next one in line. He actually takes over a place that doesn't belong to him. Okay? Meaning, if you look at that, there has to be a transitioning of an empire of some sort or turmoil in the nation, right? And that's exactly what we're seeing in the Middle East right now. Look what happened in Syria. All of a sudden, there's no leader in Syria, and even America pulled out of Syria, right? And all of a sudden, there's a void of power in Syria. So guess who came in? Russia, Iran, and China, right? Okay. Look what Afghanistan. America pulls out. Okay, guess who's going to be right there? Right? It's the same nations. Okay? They're all there. And so what happens is when there's a transition of empires or transition in a nation, it's that transition that opens the door. Right? And that's what we see historically, and that's really what we're seeing right now. It doesn't mean the Antichrist is coming tomorrow, but what we're saying is this is, for whatever reason, transitions of nations happen in blocks of history. It's just the way it works. It's just through history, and we're seeing that happening in our day right now. We're seeing a lot of it. There's a lot of unrest. Okay, so that's one. And number two, we know what he'll do. Clearly, is this abomination of desolation? He's going to set up, and then he's going to stop the sacrifices, and then here. Okay, let's just finish with this because it talks about in verse 23. It actually gives description about the Antichrist. Okay. About what he's going to do, and this you can look at that later. But here in verse 25 it says this. It says he will destroy many while they're at ease. He will even oppose the prince of princes. But he will be broken without human agency. Okay? Meaning no man is going to stop the Antichrist. Okay? But he's broken without human agency means that actually Thessalonians says when Jesus returns, he slays them by the breath of his mouth. Right? I mean, he's the one. It's not human agency, it's actually God himself. Jesus will come back and defeat the Antichrist because his time is allotted. So in Daniel, remember, he's the God of heaven. He's the sovereign one. The reason that's important is because he actually allots these times in history. And no matter how much we don't want it, how much you fast, you can fast for the 3.5 years, right? It's going to happen, right? Or you can bring guns and say, I'm going to go kill him. It's not going to happen, okay? Some things are allotted in history, and he's the sovereign one that's allotted these times and seasons, and even this 2,300 days, he's allotted it. Okay, amen. Let's take a break, and then we'll come back and look at Daniel 9.